Earth Day 2022, from the climate change crisis to concerns about the environment. What are the biggest global challenges? Hello, I'm Arnold Nijs, and this is The Heat. Earth Day is now more than 50 years in existence, and this marks Earth Day 2022. With the climate crisis raging and growing concerns over biodiversity and sustainability, saving the planet has never been more urgent. And later in the show, we will look at how a former Belgian ambassador to China is now promoting organic farming in Yunnan province. But we begin with our panel. Joining us now from Santa Barbara is Denis Hayes. He was the coordinator of the first Earth Day over 50 years ago, and founded the Earth Day Network that expanded to over 180 nations. Also joining us from Maryland is Amin Mohseni Cheraghlou. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Economics at American University. And with us too from Beijing is Einar Tangen. He is a political and economic affairs commentator. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Denis Hayes, let me start with you. You coordinated the first Earth Day, and as I said, it was more than 50 years ago. Why were you so concerned at that time about the global environment?
Well, actually in 1970, although we named this event Earth Day, it was actually much more United States Environment Day. We were focused upon local, regional, and national issues. There were a bunch of them then. People worried about air pollution, water pollution, toxic substances, endangered species, freeways cutting through inner city neighborhoods, and on and on. But all of them lacked the clout to be able to really achieve much politically. And the purpose of that first Earth Day was to take all of these dozens of disparate threads of issues and weave them together into the fabric of a unified movement with similar values called environmentalism, and thereby get enough political clout to change things.
We're now, of course, dealing with a climate crisis as well as environmental challenges and extreme weather conditions. We see that very often. What is your assessment of where we are at right now?
It's pretty difficult to have an assessment that isn't fairly bleak today. The technology has accelerated aggressively in the last 10 years, and the costs of solar energy, of wind turbines, including offshore wind turbines, of battery technologies, of electric vehicles, all of these things. I have built a building, a 6-story office building in the cloudiest major city in the contiguous 48 states that is net energy positive from the sunlight that falls on its roof. We technically are learning how to do a great many things and do them in an economically sound fashion that would lead to sustainability. But the national efforts around the world have been falling very far short. There's not a single country in the world, including mine, that has come anywhere near meeting the commitments that it designed for itself in the Paris Accords.
Amin Mohseni Cheraghlou, let's talk about the situation in the Middle East and in North Africa. What are the major environmental challenges in that region, challenges that are being driven by climate change?
Yes, thanks for having me on the program here. So I think when you look at the MENA region, 29 out of 100 most polluted cities in the world are located in this region. And the air pollution is costing MENA's economy somewhere between 2.2 to 4% of their GDP. And when you look at premature deaths in the MENA region because of air pollution, it's somewhere around 130,000 premature deaths per year. And as you know, many of the countries in the region are also water stressed, significantly water stressed. And the countries in this region, especially the countries in the Persian Gulf region, they are heavily dependent on desalination, which is also causing heavy salinity of the Persian Gulf waters, because 55% of the world's brine is produced in the region again. So, but when you look at the major cause for this climate situation in the MENA region, one suspect is always the fossil fuel subsidies. So if you look at the numbers for fossil fuel subsidies paid globally, 50% of world's explicit fossil fuel subsidies, which is around $2.3 trillion, between 2010 and 2020 was paid by the MENA governments. And implicit and explicit fossil fuel subsidies is somewhere around 16% of MENA's GDP. So you can imagine that when fossil fuel becomes so cheap to use, its use becomes inefficient, people overuse it, and it will create all these other environmental issues that I just mentioned.
Einar Tangen, of course, making progress in the battle against climate change requires a global effort. But if we look at the situation right now and the fallout over the Ukraine crisis, for instance, we see the world really dividing into two very distinct camps. And I'm wondering, how much of a setback is that in some kind of unified attempt to attack climate change?
Well, it's a massive setback. I mean, it was already very difficult with COVID-19 and the recovery. There's tremendous amounts of debt load in these developing countries, and they just simply are not being supported. The COP meetings have not produced anything. The G20 did not produce anything. And right now you have a crisis situation in addition to soaring inflation for necessities. These aren't things, that, it's not about an Apple Watch anymore. It's about how much food you can eat and whether you can run your economy. 60% of developing nations are at a point where almost 50% or more of their government revenues are devoted to paying off their debts, and that is not sustainable.
Denis Hayes, back in the 70s, dealing with environmental challenges, dealing with things like climate change, it was largely a non-partisan effort. I mean, we remember, for instance, that it was President Richard Nixon that created the Environmental Protection Agency. But today, if we look at the situation right now, politics has gotten in the way. The country is very bitterly divided, especially on the issue of climate change. I mean, how much is that hurting efforts to combat this?
Oh, it's been simply catastrophic. The country is bitterly divided not only on climate change, but on COVID, on the war, on its attitudes toward Putin, on its attitudes toward developing countries. There's virtually no issue in which folks are not at loggerheads, and that's clearly a distinction from the 1970s, when essentially every politician in America either honestly or deceptively tried to style himself or herself as an environmentalist. You don't want to forget that Richard Nixon actually vetoed the Clean Water Bill, but it turned out that Congress overrode it very substantially. And the Clean Air Act, which is really a landmark piece of legislation, that was bitterly fought by many industrial interests, passed both houses of Congress unanimously. A totally different environment than that which pervades the country today.
How do you think that can be overcome, Denis, this division that we see right now? Because it is so political. I mean, it's a political issue. It's become an election issue in many respects.
Yeah, and I think that's how it's going to have to be overcome. There's no easy course. People with strong environmental values and strong progressive values in general have to start winning elections. And I think we have diverted our attention a little bit from some of these things, surrendered leadership. And we need to develop a series of champions that can genuinely mobilize people and provide the leadership that's necessary to get people inspired to get out and work hard to win elections. Candidly, that's what happened in the 1970s. After the first Earth Day, we targeted 12 members of Congress, called them the Dirty Dozen, went after them because of their environmental records, and worked with very little money, but with an enormous amount of grassroots enthusiasm to defeat 7 out of 12 incumbents, which was almost unheard of in American congressional politics, and to do it on an issue that people hadn't even realized was an issue a year earlier. And so after that, suddenly Congress started becoming enormously responsive. And I think we have to do exactly that same thing again.
I mean, we see the enormous efforts being made right now to make the big move towards renewables, alternative sources of energy. How do you see that effort move forward? And if we look at, for instance, the Middle East, if we look at that region, I mean, what is it going to take to wean those countries in the Middle East of fossil fuels?
I think the first step would be to reduce fossil fuel subsidies or just to get rid of them altogether. As of now, renewables energy is about less than 0.5% of all MENA's energy is through renewable sources. And that's just simply because, fossil fuel is dirt cheap, and, people continue using fossil fuels. So that's the first step, to reduce fossil fuel subsidies and to actually shift those subsidies from fossil fuels towards green energy and renewable energy, which is we call brown to green subsidy swaps. That's one way of that's the first step to go about it. And if you really look at the potential in the MENA region, just the Sahara Desert, 1.25% of Sahara's desert area is enough to meet the electricity demand of the whole world, let alone Middle East. So there's immense potential, but definitely the financing has to be in place for that potential to be met.
Einar Tangen, of course, China has had a lot of success actually in reducing pollution around the country. It's also embraced alternative energy and is making advances in developing its green economy. What's the report card looking like right now?
Well, this goes back a little bit to the first question and the answer I gave, and it's really about what's happening in the world. Developing countries are having a real difficulty, and with the prices of power, energy going up, people have gone back to coal. You've seen backsliding in China. Coal use is up 5% year on year, and the reason is that it's the only way that you can kind of control these kind of soaring costs. So, when I mention about, all these countries out there, it's going to take more than just awareness. It takes actual money. There has to be funds that are put into a kind of green belt and road initiative that brings these about. Now, China is leading that because they are, in essence, they put in the most amount of renewables. They lead the world in terms of production of solar, also in terms of hydroelectric, they're number one. Also, from a whole list of points of view, China's doing it, but coal is still there. So, there has to be a commitment to doing it. China has a plan. They put this out, the 2030, 2060. The issue is, how do you adjust current circumstances, the realities that we face today, with this overall plan? So, quite frankly, it looks like China is going to take some steps to answer the current problems, but then factor that into their overall plan. But this is not possible with developing countries, and you just don't even see, as Denis was pointing out, you don't see this kind of unanimity. I remember those days, spaceship Earth. That's what I was taught in school, and it was a unifying thing. But today, there doesn't seem to be anything that unifies people, and tremendous amount of climate denial, and also population. It's doubled in the last 50 years. We don't hear enough about that. You cannot keep putting pressure on the world through population growth and expect these issues to go away.
I mean, what are your thoughts on financing this? Because, we see, for instance, developing countries, as Einar just pointed out right now, they are being burdened with the cost of this as well. I mean, what can be done to ease that burden?
Going back to my first point, globally, the cost of fossil fuel subsidies is around $6 trillion. This is implicit and explicit subsidies that we are paying on fossil fuel. So, and this is paid by, developing countries and advanced economies altogether. So I think that's the first step, that this has to stop. Fossil fuel has a lot of cost. In economic theory, we say that, you subsidize commodities or services that have positive externalities, but, you have to tax the ones that have negative externalities.
Right.
Definitely, fossil fuel has negative externality, and we have to tax it. But, when it comes to developing countries, I would want to echo the comments that was said before, that this is not. Go ahead.
All right, Denis, I've only got 30 seconds left, but looking ahead, what gives you the most hope that we can still save the planet?
I suppose two things. One, the upwelling of grassroots enthusiasm. All animals have a desire for survival, and I believe that's true for the human animal as well. And it's now beginning to manifest itself in ways that I think are making it easier and easier to organize people politically. And the second thing that's happening coincidentally is this rapid development of renewable energy technology, super efficient technologies.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. We turn now to one man's efforts to help the planet. Patrick Nijs is a former Belgian ambassador to China. He and his wife have founded an organic farm in Yunnan province. We begin with this CGTN report.
Patrick Nijs spends most of the day in his fields, sowing, weeding, watering, and harvesting. The former diplomat has kept up this habit for almost 10 years. On this day, he was growing squash crops.
They are very happy in this area. So I need to develop squashes, because what we want to do in permaculture is to find the plants which are fitting with your ecosystem, you know.
Nijs retired from his post as the Belgian ambassador to China in 2013. He then moved to a small village in his wife's hometown, Dongchuan, in southwest China. Having grown up in Africa, Nijs developed an interest in nature and became concerned about the environment at a young age. He said this village is the perfect place to settle down and practice permaculture.
I didn't want to enjoy my life. I'm not this kind of person, but I need to make myself useful. I care for nature. I care for insects, birds, trees, plants, mountains, water. If we go ahead with the way we are producing our food, there will be no more arable land, maybe 30 years from now.
When practicing organic farming, Nijs never uses pesticides, chemical fertilizers, or applies plastic film. For him, everything needs to be natural.
This is a very, very good stuff. You see,
you just mentioned that they are good fertilizer, natural fertilizer.
Very good natural fertilizer, and also the bees like it very much.
The couple's efforts are paying off. They say the soil in their fields is becoming more fertile, and some of their crops are popular in restaurants.
In our place, we have become a kind of insect sanctuary. It means that all the insects that are killed and chased everywhere, they come to our place to feel, you know, a bit safe. And I'm trying to identify all of them to see what function they have in order to understand our ecosystem.
Nijs admits there's still a long way to go to educate more people and change their mindsets. Next, he and his wife plan to create an international community in the village to engage more people who want to explore permaculture with them.
We are not trying to make money via this program. Nijs came up with this idea because he really wants to increase the biodiversity and better protect the fields.
And Nijs says no matter how many challenges they encounter, he will continue to do whatever he can to benefit nature, even if it's just a small act. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Dongchuan, Yunnan Province.
And joining me now from Yunnan Province is Ambassador Patrick Nijs. Ambassador, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to be part of it.
You are a former Belgian diplomat. You served as the Belgian ambassador to China. Tell us more about your Kabisa organic farm and why you are now working to protect the environment in China.
Kabisa comes from a Swahili name. I was born in Africa, so I bring Africa with me a bit in China. I'm doing this because I'm extremely concerned about what is happening with the planet. And when I say this, this is an understatement. Actually, I think that if we do not change our way of producing our food, consuming, exhausting all the resources of our mother in a way, we will just go extinct, and this is just a matter of time. So there is a kind of paradigm shift which is absolutely requested, And well, I want to make myself useful and use all my experience as a former diplomat to think globally, to apply this to this place, apply it locally. This place is very deep in the mountain. It's to 2,100 meters altitude. It used to be damaged by use of fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicide, a lot of tilling. So we came here 10 years ago and we found the soil which was dead. You know, what has to be done if we want to save our skin, if I may say so, is first of all to restore the soil, bring back life to the soil. This is something which is more than necessary. If we don't do this, we will just die with the soil. Our body is composed mostly out of bacteria, a little bit of human cells, but bacteria, and these bacteria are also living in the soil. If we kill them in the soil, we will kill them in ourselves and no future. We have to do that. We have to go back to nature, and this is what permaculture is actually doing, restoring, regenerating ecosystems which are producing food. And we want Cabisa to become a kind of window case and laboratory for permaculture. A lot to be done.
Okay, you mentioned a moment ago that the land is being destroyed, being damaged by chemicals, by fertilizers. You've also written about the loss of arable land, and you say that in many instances soil is turning to dust. You've made the case for what you call regenerative agriculture. Can you explain that to us, that concept of regenerative agriculture, and why you think it's important?
We have reached a point where it's not just about protection of environment. We need to regenerate the environment. We need to bring back diversity and life into places where it is gone. And this is the sense of regenerative agriculture. So this kind of way of producing food is actually regenerating the soil. It works on the model of the forest. The forest is the best model we have to ensure the natural fertility of the soil. So we need to create ecosystems which are working like forests, but making sure that all the elements that we bring into this forest are producing food. So the dream of a permaculturist is to have a forest that is producing food by itself without needing any work. So this is the goal. If you reach there, you can do nothing. But to reach there, there is a lot of work to be done and a lot of intelligence to be produced also about understanding the ecosystem from which you start and then gradually develop this ecosystem, regenerate the soil, bring diversity, new crops, and so on. So this is the sense of regenerative agriculture, regenerating the soil, regenerating the environment,
right,
which has been actually completely damaged and destroyed in many places through human activity.
Right, Ambassador, much of what you are talking about will require global cooperation if we look at things like working on issues like biodiversity, fighting climate change, healing the planet. Can that be achieved, especially in today's world when we look at rising political tensions around the world?
We need to do this global, you know. We are, the world is a village. If we don't do this all together, we are doomed. And China, in that respect, is one of the main players. So I think China will do it, and we will need China to do it. If China doesn't do it, nobody will be able to do it. So it's like we all have to roll our sleeves and go for it, and we have to do it urgently. We are not moving fast enough, and there is no solution if you don't set up a kind of global governance to get there.
Right. You know, China has made a deep commitment to sustainability, and if you look at the efforts it's making against climate change, it's taken the lead in many respects. Are you encouraged that China is making sufficient progress?
I think so. I think the West is not enough aware of this. China has realized since the 13th economic plan, it means 2 plans ahead, started already to speak about qualitative growth instead of quantitative growth. And this has actually been more and more through this 5 years plan. And China is doing a lot, and not only in making sure that we reach the carbon neutral state, but taking a lot of initiatives in respect of clean energy, re-sequestration of carbon, and in that respect, agriculture has a major role to play. That, you know, you have the best think tanks in the world in China, and these people are advising the government, and they know what's going on. And the Chinese government has the means to go fast. They have started maybe a bit later than we did in the West, where especially in Europe, we started with this kind of concerns in the year 70s. But China is moving, has the ability of moving extremely fast, and the awareness is there.
Right.
And the government has all the means it takes to go fast, and we need to go fast.
Okay.
And I'm sure that China will lead the way in many respects. I mean, the West should understand that.
Right. Ambassador Patrick Nijs, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And that is all we have time for. You've been watching The Heat. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.